Well, good morning. Good morning, everybody. I am Morton Blackwell, president of the Leadership Institute. It is my pleasure to welcome you here to our March Wednesday Wake Up Club breakfast. It's a great relief to me that we are able to resume the in-person events. The only advantage of having this breakfast online is that it's a low-calorie breakfast when we meet online. But I'm happy to be back here, and let us hope that events don't cause us similar trouble again anytime soon. We live in interesting times, and one of the most interesting phenomena that have been pretty obvious if you're paying attention is that in just the past few years there has been a dramatic decline in split ticket voting in this country. And certainly we saw this in Virginia, where we had three candidates running for governor, lieutenant governor, and attorney general, and the gubernatorial campaign was by far the best funded of those campaigns. But when the votes were counted, the three candidates that the Republicans ran for governor, lieutenant governor, and attorney general all got almost exactly the same vote. And this has happened in other states, and it has also happened and been observed by people in the Democratic Party. Time was just a few years ago when there were very substantial numbers of ticket splitters. You could have 30 or 40% of the voters were ticket splitters, but now it's down to something like 10%. And the proposition has been put forward that perhaps, and I can assure you that this has been circulated at the Republican National Committee, because I circulated this idea, that perhaps it is going to be feasible and appropriate to focus more resources in an institutional attack on the Democratic Party rather than contributing money to candidates who are going to spend their money in criticism of specific Democrat candidates. And I think that may very well be productive, because the country has been divided. I mean, the left has been attempting to divide the country, and I think they have succeeded it, but they may not like the results of this. So we shall see what happens, but that is something that has not been generally commented on that I think we should keep in mind. I encourage you to live tweet today's event. The hashtag is on the screen. In 2022, your Leadership Institute has already trained 1,091 conservatives at 31 separate training programs. And since 1979, the Leadership Institute has trained, by our best count, 243,775 activists, students, and leaders. You have before you the Leadership Institute schedule for the upcoming months. I urge you to take a moment to review these schools and consider attending one or sending a friend to one of our trainings. If you are among those watching us this morning online, visit our website at leadershipinstitute.org/training to see upcoming online and in-person trainings. Now it's my pleasure to introduce to you Ethan Madsen. who will offer an invocation and lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. He is our career services intern here at the Institute now. He is from Utah County, Utah, and recently graduated from Villa Alarife High School in Chorro Rios. Did I get that right? I got my R and the L both into that word. Chorro Rios in Lima, Peru. Ethan was the captain of the University of San Marcos U19 basketball team during his time in high school. He was also an accomplished debater at both the national and regional level. Ethan has volunteered on political campaigns and supported candidates at the city, county, state, and national levels, including Mike Lee in 2010, Rand Paul in 2016, and Ciro Galvez for his 2021 presidential campaign in Peru. And interesting news, which I just learned yesterday, Ethan has just been accepted into the United States Naval Academy.
Good morning. Would you all please join me in prayer? Our dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day, for the opportunity we have to join together this morning and to be edified by the words of our guest speaker, Miss Nicole Neily. We ask you to please guide her in her speaking so that she may lead us and give us the information we need to best act upon her words and do thy will in this nation. We ask you to guide the leaders of our country that they may seek to defend the rights of the people and to protect our founding principles. We ask you to protect the servicemen and women abroad as they continue to allow us to live the lives we live and to enjoy the comforts that we so cherish. We ask you to please help the people of this country to also have their eyes opened to do thy will and to best defend the freedoms that thou hast endowed them with. We ask you again to bless us with the company of thy Spirit this day, and we say these things in the name of thy Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
Would you all please rise? I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ethan. Now I introduce Matthew Hurt, who is going to give a programs report. Matthew Hurt is now Director of Graduate Programs at the Leadership Institute, and he maintains connections with Leadership Institute graduates to support their growth and leadership skills. Matthew is also an internationally recognized fundraiser, organizer, writer, and public speaker. Working now for more than 11 years in the conservative movement and at several conservative organizations, he has trained tens of thousands of activists here at Leadership Institute and across the country. Matthew, come give us a programs report.
Thank you, Morton. As all of you know, the last week, the most exciting political event was not last night, but it was in Orlando last week at the Conservative Political Action Conference, where your Leadership Institute had an outside presence. I want to thank first our generous donors for making it possible for us to be there, and also Carol Cox, our Director of External Affairs, who helped corral a dozen of us down in Orlando and kept us out of Disney Springs. The Leadership Institute engaged with 1,205 activists from the main stage activism training, including a panel discussion titled, "Are You Ready to Be Called a Racist? The Courage to Run for Office," where Stephen Rowe just called me a racist for 20 minutes. No. It was an excellent conversation with our Director of Digital Training, Stephen, myself, and one of our guest faculty, Heather Sellers, where we encouraged conservative activists to run for office. We additionally had one 45-minute breakout session about building your activist army online and activating them in your community. 379 job seekers connected with 31 recruiting organizations at the job fair on Friday afternoon, including 8 solid candidates for Leadership Institute employment, including 3 campusreform.org reporters, 3 potential editors, and 2 potential grassroots coordinators who will be unleashed into their communities across the country to train thousands of activists. We recruited 57 new campus activists, including 1 regional field coordinator who will help manage the field program in the fall, 11 field rep applicants, some of whom may go out into the field in the fall, 34 campusreform.org campus correspondents who will expose leftist bias and abuse on campus, and 11 campus ambassadors. Matthew Pearson, our deputy director of studios, took more than 4,000 high-quality, high-resolution photos, 440 of which have been edited and can be shared across all of your social media platforms. We're happy to share those with you. And we did more than a dozen interviews, including Real America's Voice, local talk radio in a number of media markets, 2 podcasts, and FISM TV, a Christian news station, reaching a potential audience of millions of people who will learn about the Leadership Institute's programming. So thank you again, not only to Carol, but to our generous donors for making our presence at CPAC possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Matthew. I'm delighted that you are here with us on our staff, and I know that your contribution is now substantial and will be accumulating over time. All right, and now I'm going to introduce to you Christina Novoa, and Christina will sorry, this morning got up late. She'll introduce our speaker. Christina is the political and fundraising intern here at the Leadership Institute. She is originally from New Jersey, but currently lives in Highland, Michigan. After she studied musical theater in college, she completed an internship for church leadership and rose to the top of her class. In university, she worked with Turning Point USA chapters to run events. She even took our Youth Leadership School, our flagship program, and scored as a top graduate. In her free time, she enjoys training at the gym, reading the Bible, spending time with her friends, and staying up to date with current events, which are probably proceeding at a much greater than normal rate, current events. So come up here and introduce our speaker, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Morton. Good morning, everyone. Welcome. We are going to be hearing from Nicole Neily this morning. Nicole Neily is the president and founder of Parents Defending Education, a nonpartisan, nonprofit national organization giving parents the resources and support they need to advocate for children's education. Since its launch in March 2021, Parents Defending Education has broken dozens of education-related stories from coast to coast, including the National School Boards Association's pretextual letter vilifying American parents. They have filed over 300 public records requests to the Federal Department of Education, helped more than 22,000 people submit comments to the Federal Register, and turned to the courts to open 2 lawsuits, one open case in New York State Court and one just settled case in federal court. Prior to launching Parents Defending Education, Nicole created Speech First, a nationwide membership organization that defends college students' free speech rights through litigation and other means. Neely has also worked at Franklin Center for Government and Public Integrity, Independent Women's Forum, and Cato Institute. In addition, she has worked in the private sector at a crisis communications firm and a public opinion firm. Nicole holds a bachelor's degree in political science from the University of Illinois and a master's of public policy from Pepperdine University's School of Public Policy. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a warm welcome to Nicole Neily.
Thank you, Christina. Thank you, Morton. This is such an honor. I mean, every time I see Morton, I am just I'm so impressed by every number I hear you cite. Can you imagine where the conservative movement would be without Morton and the Leadership Institute? I mean, it's like horrifying. So thank you so much for everything you have done for our country. I have had the honor and the privilege of working closely with LI staff over the past several years. First, in my work at Speech First, in working in higher education, and then now I get to recommend and refer people to LI all the time because now they're doing amazing school board trainings, which is so great. That's like totally where the field of battle is. I mean, in 2017, I launched an organization called Speech First, which is, as Christina said, worked on campus free speech, still works on campus free speech. I just don't run it anymore because I have too many things on my plate. And Speech First sues universities. So I had the tremendous fun of suing my university, my alma mater, University of Illinois. Turns out they still actually ask you for money after you sue them. Super weird. I also sued my husband's alma mater, the University of Texas. And then when they call you, you say, I know you spent $1 million on legal fees. I don't think so. But in getting that off the ground, what we were trying to figure out is where we could complement the works of great organizations like FIRE, the Foundation for Individual Rights in Education. And kind of where I saw us fitting into the ecosystem was, we're the stick. We're only the bad guys. So many of these universities are used to getting away with murder for so long. And that's why I'm so grateful for campus reform reporting on what is actually taking place. So many people reflexively give to their alma mater, not knowing what is taking place. They remember, I had so much fun at football games, not knowing how, illiberal, how unconstitutional all these universities are on a regular basis. And so by exposing it and holding them accountable, I think it's such an essential part of this. We decided to, like I said, sue the universities. When we sued our first school, the University of Michigan, right after we filed a lawsuit, and the next day the general counsel called my lawyers. I work with a firm called Consoy McCarthy, and the general counsel said, I didn't really appreciate learning about our case from the Wall Street Journal. I really would have appreciated a heads up, and I put the phone on you, and I was like, your heads up is the Constitution. How dare you? You don't get to do this anymore. You guys are used to getting endless letters, and then when you're caught with your hand in the cookie jar saying, oh, my bad, and then going back to what you were doing before. That's not okay. And I could not have done what I did without LI. Honestly, throughout all the 6 cases that Speech First has filed to date, I worked so closely with all of LI's regional coordinators. You know everybody. Your people know everyone on campus. They know who the good activists are, who the kind of flaky ones are, who the ones who are potential, what the state of play is, what the policies are. They would call me, send me tips. I'd be on the phone with them. And so, it was such an honor really getting to know these students. And now, all these students have since, they graduate, they move to DC, and I see them be activists now. And it's through your training, it's through you giving them a voice and professionalizing them. It's really so incredible what LI has done in this movement. But in the spring of 2020, as everything, kind of the world was shutting down right after CPAC in 2020, my kid's school was shut down. None of us knew what to do. And my husband is a constitutional lawyer. And so we had a lot of our friends, I'm from Chicago originally, all my friends are Chicago Democrats, start to reach out to us and say, I don't know what to do. It feels like the schools, I want my school open. It feels like they're not listening to me. And we would just sit in our backyard with a glass of wine, kind of laughing, like, ha ha ha, they don't care about you, the end. We knew, you guys know, and we know that, that's kind of how the education system works. But it was really striking to me to see how many people, the scales fell from their eyes, and they suddenly realized how disenfranchised they were in the education system. I have a 7-year-old and an 8-year-old, so back then they were 5 and 6. And so I thought, I was really struck by the fact that people they felt so powerless, and they were so demoralized by that. And I thought, that's like a really interesting data point. My kids were in a private Montessori preschool, so we didn't have any problems. But that spring we saw, as classrooms were suddenly in people's living rooms doing Zoom school, I think a lot of people were justifiably horrified by what they saw their kids learning or not learning. This is very different than when you and I were in school. And so people, they saw the lesson plans, they saw the handouts, and they thought, what is this? What is going on here? And then after George Floyd, a lot of that kicked into overdrive. We saw dozens, hundreds of schools across the country send emails to their whole community, their whole district saying, we are systemically racist. And a lot of people thought, what the heck is going on here? I was in college during 9/11, and I used to tell the students this, and they would kind of open their eyes wide because they were all born in 9/11, in 2001, which kind of surprised me. But when in major incidents, I mean, the Gulf War, in 9/11, districts did not send out emails talking about taking a political stance. And so I think a lot of people were taken aback by that. And then we saw a lot of programming kick into overdrive, major curriculum revisions, major overhauls. And people were, again, horrified. But nobody knew what to do about it. And for me, the thing that flipped the switch and why I started Parents Defending Education was that summer, the Wall Street Journal did a profile of a district near where I grew up outside of Chicago called Evanston, Illinois. It's where Northwestern is based. And the superintendent there said he was going to allow Black and brown children back for in-person education before white children because of anti-racism. And I started screaming at my computer, you can't do that, that's unconstitutional. And I went to a friend and I said, I want to sue these guys. I want to start Speech First for K-12. And my friend said, love it, yep, do it. But part of the problem is nobody knows this is unconstitutional. I think you actually need to start from a different place. Again, remember, I'm married to a constitutional lawyer, so we have dinner parties where we talk about the 14th Amendment. Like, I am very fun. But not everybody has this honor, and so I thought, okay, well, let's kind of figure this out. And so I started seeing what's out there. There has to be resources out there for parents, and it turns out a lot of the information out there about your rights in education, it's actually mostly in the higher ed context. You think about the First Amendment and free speech, it's campus free speech. You think about Title IX, it's the swimmers in University of Pennsylvania, or it's campus due process and the kangaroo courts. You don't really think about those in a K-12 setting. I thought, well, that's really interesting. And so we started building things out from there because I thought, once you know what your rights are, then you know where the red lines are drawn. And if you know where the lines are drawn, then you know if and when those lines are crossed, something has to happen. And so let's go from there. Let's make people smart. And to me, the people I want to reach, it's not the Acela corridor. It's not, kind of like the snarky East Coasters. No offense to my friends on the East Coast, I live here too. But it's, I think of, I say Bob in Omaha. Bob in Omaha, who works a 9-to-5 job after, at this point, 2 years of the pandemic, is trying to not have a nervous breakdown, get divorced, and murder his children, while still trying to hold down a job and, keep the trains running. And Bob doesn't know what to do, but Bob sees the handouts. Bob is frustrated. And we all know you say the wrong thing when you get up at a school board meeting and you are tagged as the neighborhood QAnon person for the rest of your life, right? This is a very fraught moment in time. And so how do we make Bob feel a little bit more empowered and do the right thing? And it's kind of, honestly, I think of what I do as it's kind of like a little Morton ripoff. But let's take these people, many of whom this is their first rodeo. Let's encourage them and let's take them from okay to good to great. Let's make them better advocates for their children. And so we have what I call it's like our 3-point plan: empower, expose, and engage. The first part, empower, is I'm a child of the 80s, so I used to watch old G.I. Joe cartoons. And there was always a part at the end where it would say, knowing is half the battle. Anybody remember that? Some of you? None of you? Okay, anyway. It was like, don't play with down power lines, something like that. But this is, once you know what to do, once you know what your rights are, but even where do you start with all this stuff? There's so much information out there. And so we wanted to make it easy, make it turnkey for somebody. People don't have, they're not going to read through 45 pages of new discourse on a Tuesday night after working a full day, putting their kids to bed, going to a soccer game. So we figured out, what's a guide to all the jargon out there? Because there is a lot of jargon. They want to kind of keep you out of this process. So what is anti-racism? What is culturally responsive? What is social emotional? They're trying to confuse you. We tried to break all that stuff down. What are the best articles you can read to get smart? This is a great Barry Weiss article. This is a great John McWhorter article. But let's get you smart in just reading 2 or 3 articles. What are the alternatives out there? You can't go into a school board meeting and say, I don't like the 1619 project, but you can go in and say, these, it's factually incorrect. Here are 7 other alternatives produced by Hillsdale, produced by 1770-69. You can go in with positive alternatives, and then you're actually a force for change. You're not just going in and throwing stones. And so we wanted to give people that knowledge that they were forewarned is forearmed kind of thing. And the next part, and kind of the most fun part to me, is the expose part. So much of this, these activists really want to remake our education system behind closed doors. And so, again, campus reform, sunshine is the best disinfectant. Showing what is taking place in our schools has been so fun. My vice president is a woman named Asra Nomani. Those of you in the Northern Virginia area probably know who she is. She's a former Wall Street Journal investigative reporter. She's Daniel Pearl's best friend in Pakistan. And she is a force of nature. I was just telling my table mates that yesterday she was testifying for the House Subcommittee on the Constitution and Civil Liberties. She got in a big fight with Sheila Jackson Lee because Sheila Jackson Lee tried to lecture her about what critical race theory is and is not. And Asra started recording her because she was going to put it on Twitter. And Sheila Jackson Lee started screaming at her, "Yeah, you can't record me." And the parliamentarian had to come over and say she has a right to do that. But Asra was one of the founding leaders of the Coalition for TJ, which has locally been at the forefront of the fight and to change admissions in what is the country's #1 high school. And this is a bunch of school board members, again, behind closed doors, tried to revamp the admissions process because they felt there was the wrong mix of people who were in. There were too many Asians. And so they went through, and I mean, the documents that came out in discovery, the case was litigated by the Pacific Legal Foundation, are appalling. I mean, really horrifying. Them saying, no, Asians are discriminated against in this process too. LOL. Like, I mean, really, they knew what they were doing. There was absolute racial animus in what was taking place. But Asra, in her activism with the Coalition for TJ, I mean, she became battle-tested. She calls herself an accidental activist, and she decided not only to use her knowledge of reporting. She said she didn't really expect her knowing, chasing Islamic terrorists for 20 years to equip her so well to fight school boards. But to take that knowledge of how to report and investigate things, but then also what she had learned in her activism. We use Telegram for our chat app because WhatsApp about, there's a limit to the number of people you can have in a chat. Things like that. So let's take those lessons and teach people how to do their own things. And so she and I got together, and so that's, we empower, we expose, and then the last part is, again, like LI, we try to engage people. Politics goes to he who shows up. Dick Armey used to say that. You have to show up. You have to get off Facebook and get off Twitter and go do something about it. So many of us, and I mean, I live in the DC area, so I am definitely culpable of this. I think a lot of us have focused so exclusively on the federal government for so long that we have not engaged at the state and local level as much as we should have. And the pandemic, I think, has really shown many of us that your city, your state have so much power over your day-to-day life. I mean, a few weeks ago, I went from Florida to Los Angeles. It's a tale of two cities. I mean, and so your state and your city politics matter a lot. And so, we want to encourage people, go do something. Again, it's very fraught right now. And so doing something, people have different levels of risk tolerance, and that's okay. Doing something can be anything from passing on a tip to us. We have a tip line. We receive between 100 to 200 tips a week from across the country. I mean, it is astonishing the kind of stuff that comes in. We vet everything, we fact check it, we put it up on our map, and then we pitch it out because Bob in Omaha doesn't know how to get something to Fox News, but we do. And once those national reporters start calling, you can bet that those school districts are saying, "Oh, we didn't know about that handout. We're going to stop doing that immediately." Very convenient, but again, we want to hold them accountable. So it can be anything from passing on a tip to us to what the difference is between a PTA and a PTO. I didn't know that, but you know what? The PTA actually is a pretty captured political entity, just like the National School Board Association was. We have things on why you should run for school board, the basic tips on how to run for school board. If people say they really want to, then that's when we refer them to LI and FreedomWorks' program here on running for school board. But lots of things, how to write a letter to the editor. I think things that people, again, on the Acela corridor take for granted, but that Bob in Omaha doesn't know how to do. We want people to feel like they can make a difference. And so while we tell the stories, we also don't want to crush people's souls. We want them to know you can make a difference. There are victories. I mean, what we saw in November last year, we had Glenn Youngkin as a special guest speaker at a parent event we had, and everybody started crying in the audience. I mean, people in the background saying, "Ohio loves you, South Carolina loves you." I mean, that gives people hope. The Thomas Jefferson court victory on Friday, that gives people hope. I mean, the recall in San Francisco, we can make a difference when we stand up. We have done polling. These ideas, what is being pushed in schools, they appall people across the board. This transcends political lines, this transcends racial lines. It's fascinating because so many of the people who come out to us, this is their first rodeo. They're not Tea Party activists. I mean, there are people who are coming out. We have a lot of first-generation Americans who have said, I moved to America. I knew what I was getting into. How dare you tell me getting the right answer or showing your work in math class is racist? Teach my child calculus so they can apply to MIT. What are you doing? We have teachers who reach out to us and they say, I don't like what I am being forced to do. I mean, they just I don't like these books. I don't like this curriculum. We have, Democrats who come out and say, I don't like this. I don't agree with this. And so the coalitions of the kinds of people that are getting really involved are fascinating to me. And it's so exciting to, work with them and really kind of harness that enthusiasm. And so since we're small, since we're kind of young and a startup, we're kind of trying to adapt with what comes at us. We create new guides as stuff comes up. We had a parent that we were talking to a few weeks ago who somebody accused him of defamation. I said, well, if this came up one time, it's going to come up again. Let's do a guide about what defamation and libel are so you know what your rights are. because this is, last year I think was the year that we got our activists smart. This is the year that people want to get out and do something about it. They want to run, they want to recall, they want to go testify, they want to go make change happen. But it's also, I kind of think of this as like, if it's Star Wars, this is the year that the Empire strikes back, right? They're going to try and come at all these parent groups with, you're not registered to solicit, did you do your donor disclosure form? And so, we're trying to figure out how can we make people better and more effective so that they can, they can be bulletproof, because, we know the other side plays dirty on this, but we're on the right side of this battle. And so I'm so grateful, that Morton and FreedomWorks has moved into training people to run for school board. This is such an essential element of taking back our schools from the madness that is going on. We have, as Christina said, tried to catalyze a little bit of national action, encouraging people to submit comments to the Federal Register, filing lawsuits when needed, referring people to lawyers, filing complaints with the Office of Civil Rights. Strangely, the Biden administration really is not interested in my complaints about racial discrimination. It's very strange. But again, we expose that. The fact that you ignored, districts racially segregating students, saying that white kids can't come to this event. Like, in most settings, that actually, that's a real problem that violates Brown versus Board of Education. And the fact that the Biden administration is kind of, dismissing all this stuff, that's a story in and of itself. And I think what this has shown us, there is, parents matter, right? Families matter. And I think back to the November election, think about what Terry McAuliffe said. It was not a gaffe. People had called it a gaffe. I think there's a significant strain of thought on the political left, unfortunately, that think, we know better than you do. Can you just sit down and keep your mouth shut? We know how to run the things. We're in charge. We're the experts here. And this is, my coworker Oscar has called it, this is the mama bear revolution. How dare you tell me how to raise my child? How dare you get in between, that relationship? And this is something we're trying to exploit in the courts as well. We filed a brief last year in a case called BLV Mahanoy, the swearing cheerleader case. All the lawyers I work with are former Clarence Thomas clerks, and so we wrote a brief kind of tailored towards him. We had 25 cases from the 1800s cited in that, talking about this whole idea in loco parentis, in place of the parents. Our schools have always operated, they've held this special place in society because our schools, when you drop your kid off, the school is supposed to be acting in place of the parents. We now see schools actively working against parents, trying to undermine families. Clarence Thomas didn't pick up on that, but Justice Alito did. And this is something I think that's, there's a real opportunity for us here, because this is a relationship that is, it's fundamental to our country. The courts have recognized over and over and over again. And it's something that, aside from the courts recognizing, it's something that we as parents recognize. We will not give up. We will, defend our children until our last dying breath. And so it's an honor to be here with all of you. And I mean, I'm such a fan of Morton, so it's an honor kind of to follow in his footsteps and try and recreate what he has done at the campus level, kind of in the, in the adult space. And so thank you so much. And I look forward to taking your questions and going from there. Thank you.
This really is exciting. When I made the decision in the early summer that the Leadership Institute was clear to me that something big was going on, and with respect to school boards. And folks, this is big. It may not bring in as many new people to politics as did the Tea Party in 2009 and 2010, but it could. There are unquestionably huge numbers of people who have never lifted a finger in the public policy process before are now being activated. And this is a wonderful, fine organization, and we're so pleased that you're there and you proved so successful. I'm sure there will be questions, and so we'll, all right, there he is.
Hello, thank you so much for being here. I thought you brought up some really good points, and honestly, the dinner table conversations about the 14th Amendment, I think are really important. I was just reading American Marxism by Mark Levin, and he makes a really good point that a lot of the evils of critical race theory is contradicting the 14th Amendment. Have you seen successful battles across this country as to, pushing back against CRT and maybe leveraging the 14th Amendment of the Constitution to do so?
Yeah, it's kind of an evolving legal landscape. There hasn't been a ton of cases brought to date yet, but it is definitely, we're trying to find, what are the right cases, what are the right examples, and one problem is that we have found people are really scared to have their names attached to it, right? I mean, you are Abigail Fisher, right, from Fisher v. Texas. Like, you are that person for the rest of your life. And so we are actually, Parents Defending Education is structured as a membership association. So when we sue schools, it's Parents Defending Education versus Wellesley Public Schools instead of being Nikki and Stephen versus Wellesley Public Schools. The anonymity actually is a big deal to people. The day that we filed our lawsuit against Wellesley Public Schools, we actually had a mom drop out. She said, even if there was a 0.1% chance that my name will get out, I can't do that to my family. My husband will lose his job. My kids will have to transfer. So people, I think, very credibly fear retribution.
Thanks.
Of the tips we get, 99% of them say they check the box, I want to be anonymous. And so we end up going on TV. We take the slings and arrows and not those people. So yeah, it's the lawsuits they're forthcoming. And they're coming from students and families. They're coming from teachers. I mean, the stuff that is going on in our schools is astonishing. And what breaks my heart is that, groups like the Southern Poverty Law Center, they say that they have 500,000 educators in their network. You don't build that up in the wake of George Floyd. You have been working at building that network for 40 years without any of us knowing what's going on. And so we have a lot of work to do, but at the end of the day, we are going to be able to defeat like these horrible ideas the same way that we desegregated buses and water fountains in the 60s. I mean, it is unjust to treat people differently on the basis of immutable characteristics, period. And it's, that's what made me so angry in that hearing yesterday with my coworker is Sheila Jackson Lee is saying, well, this is a complicated theory being taught in law schools. It's not taught in schools. I mean, I tell people, look, my kids went to a Montessori preschool. The most important part of their education was not, in fact, reading the collected works of Maria Montessori. It was the implementation. It was the pedagogy. And so you can call it critical race theory. You can call it magical unicorn theory. You are treating children to identify and treat each other on the basis of their skin color. That is wrong, that is immoral, and that is unconstitutional. The end. And so I think, we have the moral high ground as well as the legal ground.
Thank you. Melvin Adams with Noah Webster Educational Foundation. I enjoyed hearing you today. Thank you for all you're doing. A moment ago, you said it's just incredible the things that are going on in our schools. Are you aware of the documentary that's going to be aired on the 14th of this month called Whose Children Are They?
Yes, that Rebecca Friedrichs did produce. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we're promoting that. I think all of us need to. I've seen the whole documentary. It's fantastic. It goes into many, many areas, and parents, grandparents, and educators need to know that. They need to know what's going on. So I encourage all of us to promote that.
Yeah, and it is such a wisely named documentary, Whose Children Are They? Because once in a while, the mask slips on the other side. I mean, we saw the Michigan Democratic Party about, a month ago. They put on their Facebook account, and then they had to take it down, but everybody screenshotted it. The role of public education is to educate children to fit into society, and basically, we will determine what your children need to know. This is not your role. They got a bunch of blowback again. They took it down, but this is, once in a while, they do kind of let you know what their true intentions and how they really view you are. You are, birthing parents. You are not, right? You're whatever they call it now. But we will not let that happen. They are our children. Period. The end.
I'm Erica Burson. I am a mama bear from Arlington County, People's Republic of Virginia. Our children have been damaged over the past 2 years. From the minor example, unless you're an actress, of having to perform a play in masks and 95 masks at a competition. Now that the masks have finally come off in Arlington and other places, how do we document the harms to our children? And for special needs kids, these harms have been particularly profound. How do we not forget this? And how do we promote positive ideas to remediate? That was one of the themes that Youngkin had in his campaign.
Yeah. I mean, my daughter yesterday dressed up she was calling it Mask Freedom Day. This is my 7-year-old. And so, it's horrifying. And I mean, to watch the CDC, right, change their guidance right before the State of the Union, right, purely for optics. It wasn't the science, it was the political science that changed. I think there's definitely, there is going to be, and there should be, litigation about the harms to special needs children who were, astonishingly damaged. And I think one thing that the left is not good at recognizing or acknowledging is who was really most impacted by the school shutdowns, by the masking. It was economically disadvantaged children. I filled out the Arlington Equity Survey, and they said, what do you think about equity? I said, what is inequitable is you keeping schools closed for extended periods of time, which disproportionately impacts working families and working mothers. So, we talk about who are we going to help? Our schools are not addressing the astonishing, heartbreaking learning loss. You go district after district looking at year-over-year performance and test scores, it's down. It's across the board, it's down. And are our schools actually addressing that? Pretty much no. They have our kids for 7 to 8 hours a day. Are we devoting every single minute of every day to addressing learning loss, to remediating any of those? My 8-year-old is not good in school. He can barely write. And what are they doing? They're using 4 hours to do social and emotional and feelings and bullying. So this is a zero-sum game. How you spend, my time, my children's time in school, and they have absolutely abdicated their responsibility. And that's, I think, one of the reasons we have seen so many families pull their kids out, go to private school, homeschool, because this is not sustainable. And we have failed a generation, and this is going to disproportionately impact. We talk about the school to prison pipeline, all that stuff. These are kids who, if you're not able to read and write from an early age, you'll never have that love of learning. And I think this is a lost generation.
Morton has a question.
Yeah. Well, there are a lot of other questions, but I want to. How are you funded? How do you raise money? Obviously, all the work that you're doing. Their phone bills and mailings and so forth.
What's that line from the streetcar named Desire, The Kindness of Strangers? We're a 501c3. We're a nonprofit. So yeah, we raise money. It's nice to go on TV because people see you and they think, I like what you guys are doing. And fortunately, it's a target-rich environment, so we have a lot of people to take shots at.
Right. Do you do direct mail?
We do direct mail. We do email solicitations. Matt has worked with me a little bit on some of our email stuff. And yeah, just building relationships.
Well, if somebody wanted to write a check to you this morning, to whom should the check be made?
It's Parents Defending Education. Our website is defendinged.org. But you can go on, you can look at our resources, you can go on and look at our map as well, so you can see what's in your school. You can pass on a tip for us because we want to publicize all this. We want to show, one of the fun things about having this tip line is we can show the trends. It's not just a one-off thing that's happening in Alaska or Michigan. It's, oh my gosh, this curriculum is in like 25 cities across the country. I don't know, those of you in the area might have heard a few weeks ago, Fairfax County had an assignment or a lesson plan called Privilege Bingo. You had to check off different things, and one of them was military kid. My brother's buried in Arlington. Let me tell you what privilege is. Privilege is fearing a knock on the door every morning that your loved one is deployed. How dare you, Fairfax County, say privilege bingo? So my coworker dug into it. We filed a FOIA. And we figured out where the lesson plan came from. And so we're trying to figure out right now, where else is this? This is not just a one-off, right? And so this is insidious, and they shared that, all these teachers, they get their lesson plans off online. Let's out these bad guys and hold them accountable and hold the decision makers accountable too for putting this stuff in.
Hi there. Yep. So thank you so much for your talk today and for everything you're doing. You mentioned how many parents are really upset about this, and I'm hearing the same thing, and I'm doing a lot of research about these issues and stuff. And I'm just wondering, there seems to be such a groundswell of opposition, and yet at the same time they seem to be so entrenched already with a lot of these policies. So do you have any insight into, if no one wants this, where is it coming from?
Yeah, there is a reason people call it the education blob, right? Like we all knew that the teachers unions were bad, but I didn't expect the National School Board Association to be bad, the National PTA to be bad, the National School Counselors Association, the school psychologists, and the school nurses to all be in favor of this gender affirmation where schools transition kids behind families' backs and don't tell the parents. Who is in on these different policies? It's the trade associations, it's the unions, there are so many dark parts where they have just all, again, operated very cozily behind closed doors. And they're doing it with our tax dollars to our children. So it's insult to injury. And the fact that, we're outing it now and we're exposing it and people are unhappy, that's what makes them really mad, because it's threatening their power. But it's like I said, it's a target-rich environment, because I mean, every single day it's like, fresh hell is this? I didn't expect the math teachers to be bad. I mean, the Gates Foundation funding this whole idea of equitable math, what is that coming from? The state of Oregon getting rid of graduation requirements in the name of equity because they want to help BIPOC students? You are telling my child, who is a minority, that he is, probably not capable of learning how to read or write, and so we're just going to give you a diploma anyway. That's insulting. How dare you tell my child that? We are driving expectations down for our children. We're not encouraging people to thrive. So it's coming from everywhere, but it is opposed by the majority of actual normal human beings. So that's good, at least.
Hi, I'm Richard Corris. I belong to the Foundation for Individual Rights in Education.
Yeah.
And my sort of activist role is when they're handling cases and they want public support, I find the people at the universities in charge and get them on the phone and talk to them. It seems like, you've got these universities where Marxists and leftists control the entire faculty. And as long as that's the case, we're not really going to get far in advancing free speech. These are public institutions under public authority. I think the best thing is basically just to fire the Marxists and bring in a normal mix of Republicans and Democrats. I mean, the public has the right to control its universities. So my thing is, I want to find some kind of group to get together that says just fire the Marxists. Basically, take our universities back from the communists.
Tenure is a problem, right? Like, tenure is supposed to allow people to...
A state legislator can write that out of the law. They can change the law. They're public institutions.
But we also see, I mean, when we sued the University of Texas, there were, looking at the kinds of trustees are kind of bought into this. They really like going to football games. Like, they like having access to stuff. And so I don't know if there is necessarily the will to change a lot of these institutions.
Bottom line is, it's public money, public authority, public laws.
I agree. I look forward to finally doing it.
They have the authority to do it, so
yeah.
I'd like to get together some kind of coalition to essentially fire the Marxists.
Yeah, your budget is about 3 times what mine is, so I look forward to Fire leading that. Do we fix all the things?
Hi, thank you so much for what you're doing. So my wife and I are 30-year residents of Arlington with 3 kids who fortunately have gotten out of the public school system before all this CRT stuff really took hold. But we just got a notification from Arlington Public Schools that there's a survey that there's a third-party crawl. I think it's called Panorama.
Yes.
And they're doing a survey, social emotional survey, and I went through the questions, and most of them seem fairly innocuous, but there was 10% that's really focusing on race. It's like, and it's for the teachers and the students. It's like, do you feel, for the teachers, do you feel enough has been done to fight systemic racism? Or, with the assumption that systemic racism exists. Things like that, and it just seemed like it was an attempt to later justify a big overhaul of the curriculum because they're going to find racism through this survey. But I was just wondering, what could we do about that kind of thing?
Yeah, no, Panorama Education that's a vendor that came out at the same time that we uncovered all the National School Board Association stuff. Right after, for those of you who are not familiar with this, the National School Board Association at the end of September sent a letter to President Biden saying, all these issues of school boards, they invoked the Patriot Act, the bunch of hate crimes legislation, interstate commerce. It was like a first-year law student trying to figure out how can we get the federal government involved in these things? Throw all the laws at it. But lightning speed, for the federal government, 5 days later, a memo was issued by the Department of Justice by Attorney General Merrick Garland saying, yep, we were totally going to be involved in this. We are on top of it. We received a tip from a parent in Fairfax who said, you should look into Merrick Garland because his family is involved in this Panorama Education. His son-in-law is the founder of this company that has raised $60 million from places like Lorraine Powell Jobs, the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative, and they ask questions, and it's all in the name of evidence and data, but they ask deeply intrusive questions of students across the country. They say that they operate in thousands of districts across the country. This is not just Arlington. But the kinds of questions that they ask, about race, about gender, there is actually a federal law called the PPR, the Protection of People Rights Amendment, where parents have to actually give you permission to ask questions about sex, about, really deeply personal things like that. Most parents don't know. Most parents don't know that they can opt out of these surveys. And then once they have all this data, then they use it as further justification to get involved in your kid's head. And the scary thing is, did you know on average 2 school districts a day are hacked? So what happens to that data after all this data is gathered? I mean, my 7-year-old has a bad day, says, I hate mommy. And then, where does that go from there? Or that mommy and daddy have a gun at home or something like that. It's the idea of what's out there and then how it's being used and weaponized against us is really horrifying. And so we have, my coworker Asra did a big report on these consultants that are profiting off our children. We have, I think, identified at this point over 125 diversity consultants operating in hundreds of districts across the country. We have backup contracts for all of them to show, this is what you're doing. Contracts from Loudoun County. We're not teaching critical race theory. Critical race theory for teacher education training session kind of thing. And again, this is being done with our tax dollars. Arlington County, my kid's elementary school has trailers in the back. I would actually like Arlington County to spend money building buildings and not on these surveys. And I think those are conversations that we as a society should be having. But these school board members are making these decisions behind closed doors. I have opted my kids out of it, but we're trying to just raise awareness so that parents know this is what's being done. It sounds, happy, wonderful, magical unicorn language. This is what they're asking. This is what they're going to do with it. And it's further justification for them to intervene. Something that all of you should know about is that the Biden administration actually is about to undo all of the Title IX rules that Betsy DeVos put in place in May 2020. So not only are they going to kind of strip out a lot of due process protections that the DeVos rules put in, but they're also going to put a gender overlay on all of these things as well. They just had they were requesting comments on civil rights data collection. So schools every 2 years have to submit a bunch of data about discipline rates and success rates. And traditionally it has always been, is the student male or female, right? We want to say boys are expelled at higher rates than girls. They want to add a third category, non-binary. Once we start asking children, again, as young as kindergarten, right? If it's public schools, if you are non-binary, my kid still believes in the tooth fairy, so they don't know what that means. Then it gives them greater justification, right? To say, okay, well, 25% of our student body says non-binary because they don't know what that means, or we have told kids that if you're a girl and you like sports, then maybe you don't match on the inside what you are on the outside, right? We're starting to confuse kids. Then it gives them greater justification to say, okay, well, we need a bunch of programming about this stuff. Well, it's all kind of pretextual, but it's really, the questions are kind of, it's the door for them to get into all of these programs. And so it's deeply problematic. I'm glad you raised that. Thank you. It was kind of a dark note to end on. The good news is the cavalry is coming. We work with, at this point, we don't have chapters. Having worked in DC for so long, I don't want to run or manage chapters. I don't want somebody to be tied to the fact that I'm like a terrifying conservative. And I don't want to have to spend a week apologizing for a tweet that somebody who, I barely know made 14 years ago, because the Washington Post loves to do that. We have encouraged people to start their own chapters, their own little parent groups around the country. Some of them are organizations, C3s, C4s, PACs. Some of them are just, 10 moms with a closed Facebook group. We work with over 200 of them that have formed just in the past year and a half, specifically on this issue. Not on masks, not on school choice, but just on politics in school. There are people everywhere that care about this. And the kinds of people that are coming out, again, it transcends party lines, it transcends racial lines. People are mad about this stuff. They're mad about the race, they're mad about the curriculum, they're mad about the gender, they're mad about the war on excellence and the elimination of advanced math programs in the name of equity. That if only the wrong people are special, then nobody can be special. This issue is not going away. I worried last year that when schools reopened, would this be an out of sight, out of mind problem? No. If anything, our activists in September were even more angry and worked up than they were before because they didn't know what was taking place. And schools continue to hold parents at arm's length. I can't enter my kid's elementary school in Arlington because COVID. Parents ask for lesson plans and they're told file a public records request. This issue and the way that schools talk down to people is not going away. This issue is not going away. But parents are mad and we are not going away. And so, with all of you working together and all of you keeping your ears and eyes open, we can fight this and we can win. So thank you. Thank you for coming. And thank you for having me.
Thank you very much, Nicole. As a token of our appreciation, I present to you an Adam Smith scarf.
Oh, thank you.
Happy to have you here. Thank you so much. You're doing great work. Now, what's the name that needs to go on a check to your organization again?
Parents Defending Education.
3 words. Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it. please join us on April 6th, which will be our next Wednesday Wake Up Club breakfast. I encourage you to RSVP online at leadershipinstitute.org/breakfast. Addison, would you please step up here? All right. Anyone who would be interested in a tour of our Stephen P.J. Wood building and our Emerson and Dolores Wright Center for Campus Reform, come up here. Addison Cowling will be happy to give you a great tour of the Leadership Institute, and we'll be very happy to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you so much for coming.